Today we're going to talk about experience design through the lens of ROX, or return on experience. If you don't know me already, I'm an experience strategist and ROX specialist. I have expertise across various subsectors in the experiential industry. I'm the creator of the Remarkable framework and author of the Remarkable Experience Report. So we're going to talk about Remarkable later on. But first, I want to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to do. So there will be an overview of ROX. We're going to talk about what's beyond KPIs. We're going to talk about the tools that you need to understand ROX, and then also how Remarkable supports the ROX ecosystem. So my goal is that by the end of the presentation, you feel empowered to explore it, whether that's for yourself, whether that extends all the way to your projects, teams, and organizations. So in order to best understand ROX, we're going to take a macro view. Just a reminder, it stands for return on experience. It is distinct from ROI. Ultimately, ROX is a metric about emotional resonance, and so it requires human intelligence and interpretation. I'm going to read this quote. The first step is to measure whatever can be easily measured. The second step is to disregard that which can't easily be measured or given a quantitative value. The third step is to presume that what can't be measured easily really isn't important. And the fourth step is to say that what can't be easily measured really doesn't exist. So this is a description of the McNamara fallacy. The quote is by Daniel Yankelovich. He's a public opinion analyst and social scientist. The fallacy is named after Robert McNamara, the US Secretary of Defense from 1961 to 1968. The reason why I'm incorporating it today, because it's most relevant to ROX in this way, is an overemphasis on quantification and numerical data. So what Yankelovich was describing was McNamara's approach to the war between the United States and Vietnam. McNamara was attempting to reduce war to a mathematical model. And one story recounts a conversation between a US Air Force general and McNamara. The general told McNamara he needed to add an X factor into his calculations. Apparently, McNamara wrote that down and asked what it was. And the general said that it represented the feelings of the rural Vietnamese people. McNamara erased the notation, saying he could not measure it. Okay, so I want you to hold on to that for a minute. We're going to come back to it. But for now, I'm going to tell you a very different story. So in the summer of 2023, I went to an event. Technically, it was a marketing activation, except that there was almost no marketing. Okay, so what do I mean by that? This was produced by the French luxury brand Hermès. And in this particular activation, the story centered around Pegasus, the immortal winged horse. So Pegasus had 7 foals, and each of them needed to discover their unique lightness so that they could learn how to fly. And this was a real fusion of theatrical and cinematic magic. So each of the 7 foals was represented by a set. Most of them were miniatures. You have a live vignette that is performed, and then simultaneously it was also filmed. So you have these incredible dual views. You have the on the ground view, as though you are watching from the wings of a theater. So you see the performers, you see the stagehands, you can see some of the special effects like fans and smoke machines. And then you have the cinematic view, where the stagehands, the special effects, sometimes actually the performers themselves would disappear. So in one case, you're seeing the craft of storytelling, and in the other case, you're seeing just the pure magic of the storytelling. And some of the vignettes were very surreal, and others were incredibly whimsical, like the handbag opera. So again, why am I telling you this? Well, I said it was a marketing activation, except that it lacked all of the standard KPIs that we tend to look to. So this was an unshoppable event. There was no gift shop, there were no QR codes, no promo codes. There were no wares on display other than within the vignettes themselves. And they were so seamlessly integrated that it didn't feel like this big branded moment. I did have to RSVP due to capacity limitations. So Hermes has my email address. I have never once received an email from them since then. This was not featured on their social accounts. There was almost no press. There was a invite only event, but then after that, the company offered up 24 shows, which were free and open to the public. It really felt like a gift. And just to be very clear about this, this was an expensive, labor-intensive production. This required incredible resources, creative time, energy, money. This had an international tour. The logistics were incredible. And then again, I went to see this in LA in the summer of 2023. 2 years later, it was produced in Miami. So this is not tied to a specific trend or product launch, which all of this combined begs the question, what is Hermes doing? You've got this incredible activation. It's all about artistry, connection, and wonder. It is totally anchored in emotional resonance and not those standard KPIs. And the way I describe it is it felt transactionless. How rare is that? So the company does have a track record of activations, and I'm a great example of what they've been building. This is all about cultural integration and long-term brand building. So many people can attest to the fact that I've become this incredibly effusive brand evangelist. And my brand affinity, I still don't own a single thing by the company, but my brand affinity is worth so much more than any single sales conversion ever could be. So, okay, now let's pull the two stories together. So here's your ROX playing field. On the one side, you have the McNamara fallacy. So there is this fixation on quantification and numerical data. And sometimes that leads to other key details being totally missed, or they're disregarded or ignored. I also want to go back to Yankelowitsch's quote for just a moment. I don't think that anyone in the experiential industry is at the fourth step saying feelings don't exist. I think depending upon the production, we are often somewhere in between these two. So the second step is to just disregard what can't be easily measured. And the third step is to presume that it's not really important. I think often we're in step two. Okay, and so then on the other side, you've got On the Wings of Hermes, which I've just waxed on about. So you have this thing that feels like an incredible cultural moment. It's all about feeling. And it's such a fantastic example of what we're missing when we don't capture ROX. So this is your ROX playing field. Okay, so why does this matter? Well, we've just established there is no ROX benchmark for the experiential industry. So even though On the Wings of Hermes was all about feeling, there was no standardized methodology that I could use that could show this incredible emotional impact that it had on me. And so without a benchmark, decisions are based, as we know, on repetition, intuition, and or incomplete data. And what's happening is we're missing opportunities for connection or for deeper connection. So ROX informs everything from goal setting and intentionality to actual design, marketing, and financing of these productions. We have to go beyond the short-term transactional successes, which may or may not have long-term emotional connectivity. We need to look to how we are developing the long-term relationships and things like lifetime customer value. The tyranny of the quantifiable is a great reminder that in the pursuit of ROX, we need to not cling to the emotional floaties of measurement. What I mean by that is attention does not necessarily translate to memory. Reach does not necessarily mean engagement. Scale doesn't necessarily equate depth. Present impact does not necessarily indicate future impact. Similarly, data is only as meaningful as the stories it can tell and what we can glean from it. So I will use a recent cultural moment that is from the World Cup tournament. Argentina, they are the defending world champions. They came into the tournament ranked #1 in the world. Cabo Verde was making its inaugural appearance. It is a small country. It is ranked 67th globally. Anyone that saw Argentina play Cabo Verde would tell you that even though the outcome, the final score was Argentina 3, Cabo Verde 2, so technically Cabo Verde lost, they won. They won the hearts of millions and millions of people. So the data alone, the number alone, does not give you the full picture. People are not numbers. It is about human value, not just efficiency. So there needs to be enough emotional capital to sustain the desired outcomes. The challenge then, as we know, is that what matters most to people, what they actually remember, is how something made them feel. Now, feelings are, of course, subjective, they are abstract, they are complex and nuanced, they are inherently difficult to quantify. So there is not going to ever be a quick, simple solution for capturing ROX, which means that the goal is we need to strike a balance between utilizing traditional evaluation metrics and then doing the work of capturing ROX. So it's not just about more data, it is about better data. It is about data that shows if and how people care about something. And what this means is we need to take a holistic approach. So context and discernment are essential. Without these, the numbers are amorphous, and that is what allows teams, when they're utilizing context and discernment, to actually have an informed and actionable perspective so that they can iterate and improve from an informed POV. Okay, so what we need is a mix of qual and quant. And there are other people that are at the forefront of ROX. So on the sentiment and behavioral side, I want to spotlight Dax Kalner and the Event Marketing Measurement Association, also Justin O'Hare at Ether. And then we have people on the biometric side, like Dr. Paul Zak and his team at Immersion Neuroscience, and Joe Timson and his team at Kaveya. It's about taking a really comprehensive view. It's that total toolkit. Okay, so I've just made the case for why the industry needs to establish an ROX benchmark. There's something else that the industry needs, and it's embodied by this next quote. For any field to develop, the terms used in the field must be defined. Otherwise, participants can't discuss the field intelligently, and it is therefore hard for the field to advance. So in addition to that ROX benchmark, we also need shared language. And Remarkable supports both of those. Great, so what is Remarkable? Remarkable at its core is a framework for examination. It is a standardized methodology that fills in gaps from other metrics. And as such, then it offers deeper insight into why and how an experience was successful. It is ultimately a better way of asking questions and parsing data to make impactful, memorable moments. The advantage is that Remarkable is both product and process. What I mean by that is the product is the scoring. So it's a way to measure sentiment through quantification of qualitative response. But this is equally important. The process is the act of reflection. It's a way to understand and articulate the impact of a production. We're going to talk more about reflection later on. So Remarkable is both a means of attention and a record of it. Let me give you a little overview about the research that led to this. So to date, current information for Remarkable is that it's based on more than 800 productions. This is nearly 1,000 hours of firsthand field research with insight from industry experts. And the framework is currently on its fourth iteration. The road to Remarkable started in 2020. I won't go into the origin story here. You can read about it in the reports or on the Remarkable website, which I'll share at the end. So this scope is from 2020 to 2025. It's a little outdated, doesn't include everything to 2026, but we'll just go through this quickly. So it's based on 746 productions that I have gone to. That amounts to 802 hours. That is time spent just at the experience. It does not include travel, research, booking, etc. This is broken down into two types. So we have in-person, which is 81%, and then digital, virtual, remote at 19%. I broke that down further into 8 categories. So you have...
It's the World Experience Organization. They do these.
Hey, Chris, thanks. So there's 8 categories. So it's installation and interactive art, participatory theater and LARP, attractions, themed and location-based entertainment, games and escape rooms, experiential marketing, spatial audio and audio theater, XR, and then there is sort of a catch-all of other live and interactive productions. This spanned across 11 geographical markets in the US and UK. Great. So what is Remarkable? It stands for these 10 components. So it's resonance, exchange, magic, adequacy, recommend, knowledge, allocate, bond, legend, and engrossing. This is an overview of the framework and its 10 components. They're the questions that they ask and all of their corresponding scoring. We are not going to do a deep dive into this. Again, it's available using other resources, and I want to focus on giving you information around how you use Remarkable and what its value is. So the overview is that, okay, there's these 10 components. It's a collection of distinct elements, but they also have interplay between them. So they inform and build on each other. And this ultimately creates a holistic system of what is most essential for a complete and resonant experience. Remarkable can be used in 2 ways. So there's the evaluative tool. It is a 25-point weighted system of these 10 components. It takes that qualitative information around event sentiment and converts it into a numerical score. And that is complementary to that emergent data like biometric, as well as traditional business metrics. And so the important thing is it adds that insight, it adds that context by providing emotional scope and behavioral information. And then Remarkable can be used as a diagnostic tool. So it offers you defined, consistent, shared language. This is so helpful across teams, with clients, with audiences if you use it as a survey. The components clarify which ones are most integral. We'll talk about those more in a moment. So they identify the nature of an experience and can assess its performance. So this is not just a mechanism for labeling. It facilitates a more essential investigation of, is the work working? And that's why it can be utilized throughout production, ideation, development, beta testing. So those components actually break down into 2 balanced categories. You have core components and supplemental components. So the core components are your emotional anchors. These are what become design drivers that align with KPIs and desired business outcomes. Your supplemental components, they are still important, but they are not your emotional anchors. Think of these more as conditional aspects. So they're a byproduct of design from the core components. What I found in my research, both last year and this year, it held up, is that if a production delivers on those core components, the scoring for the supplemental components will inherently rise. So those core components, I said, these are your emotional anchors. These are your design drivers. These are the weighted components. So that's resonance, magic, knowledge, bond, and engrossing. Your supplemental components, these are non-weighted. These still matter, but exchange, adequacy, recommend, allocate, and legend are so dependent on the core components. This is also just a visual overview of the scoring and weighting. We won't do a deep dive into this either. So this is a visual just to help you get a sense of what it would look like for production to score across all of the components to the maximum amount. So this tallies to 25 points. But what's so important about this is the system requires a perspective shift. So this is not just about, oh, you need to score as close to 25 as possible. What I found in my research, and again, this has held up, is that there are three key thresholds of just 10, 12, and 15 points. I was genuinely surprised by this. So even though 25 is the maximum number of points you can score, the way that I describe it is actually 15 is the most important number. And that divide between 15 and 25, it's not as wide as it seems. So the focus should be on the thresholds and not just the score. This is why the framework really allows for a full spectrum of experiences. Okay, so I'm gonna close the loop on ROX, and I'm gonna do so by talking about the thing that you absolutely have to have, whether or not you use Remarkable. You need to have emotional fluency. So this requires four key things: an expanded vocabulary, strong self-awareness, and a robust ability to self-assess, and then also opportunities for reflection. This could actually be ordered any which way. These all have interplay between them. They inform each other. They are all important. When I talk about self-awareness and self-assessment, okay, why is that so crucial? There's a way to think about this, that if I know myself, then I might know you. So how are we talking with people, again, across teams, across clients, stakeholders, and with audiences? How can we incorporate feedback if we don't even feel empowered to describe our own feelings, to identify the emotions, to talk about why something made us feel a certain way? So the best way that I can try to understand you is to better understand myself. You need to be able to have that emotional fluency, that expanded vocabulary in order to reliably evoke the feelings that you're trying to elicit. And what this does is it creates positive feedback loops. So humans naturally learn through feedback loops, and that kind of purposeful practice generates purposeful learning. That's what helps to lead to expanded language landscape. And that's the kind of high quality sentiment-centered feedback that we need in order to, again, iterate and improve. Containers for reflection. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. This is so key. This is key for your individual practice. This is key for any of the projects that you are working on. Reflection, it's a vital part. There are scientific studies that show that reflection solidifies resonance and memorability. So this all creates a virtuous cycle. The more that you can reflect, it increases your ability to have self-awareness and to be able to self-assess. And then that helps you to expand that vocabulary, and then you come all the way back around. So again, no matter what capacity you're working in the experiential industry, whether or not you actually use Remarkable, this is the one thing I want you to walk away with, that for ROX, emotional fluency is the starting line. Okay. I'm going to close with acknowledging that our industry is at an inflection point. We've had this perspective shift by consumers, and we know that across demographics, people are less interested in acquiring goods and more focused on exploring experiences. This has been trending for some time. What's interesting is that this shift has evolved alongside an ownership crisis. What do we even own anymore? We have this rise of enshittification. So, in terms of product manufacturing, planned obsolescence is built in. Overall quality has degraded. Everything is now a subscription model. We don't buy a lot of these goods anymore, we rent them. And we're ultimately renting access, knowing that that access can be rescinded at any time. The power of experiences is that we own them. We may have to lease most everything else, but we get to keep how something made us feel. We can lay claim to memories. Those are ours. Thank you.